Well, good day, everyone. My name is Paul Barry, and I'm Vice President at Flatiron's Digital Innovations. I'm joined today by George Florentine, who's our Vice President of Technology. What George and I are going to talk to you about is COVID virus and how that is affecting IT systems in major organizations throughout the world, and in particular, how that's affecting some of our banking organizations. As you all know, in recent articles and recent news publications, there's been a huge spike in unemployment claims, a huge spike in requests for funding for people to continue their payroll and to keep operations going. And the huge volume and velocity in these requests has literally brought some of the nation's major IT systems to its knees. They are not able to handle this huge volume of requests on a daily basis. And primarily, this is caused because these systems are built on 50 and 60-year-old technology, which is built on a technology called COBOL. So, George, why don't you talk to us a little bit about why some of these organizations are still running these COBOL-based systems?
Yeah, Paul, well, it's great to be with you here today. And it's it's a really interesting situation. I think what we've seen is a lot of these applications, as you said, were built decades ago, and they basically work. Right, and I think there's two things that have really caused a slowdown of migration of the systems. One is, the people who know them are a little bit older, like you and I are. They're starting to migrate out of IT. They might be retiring, moving on to a second career or whatever. And so some of the expertise is, there's sort of a brain drain in the industry. People about know these systems. I think the other part that's been interesting is today, if you were looking at a modern day system, we tend to build in these things called microservices, and we have very small libraries. You might be writing in JavaScript or React or Angular. And so we build up with all these little building blocks, and it's easy to replace a building block. If we don't like the way our date picker works, we put in a new date picker. COBOL is one of the languages with the largest number of functions. So if you look at a COBOL system, it might have 500 different components, and they're all written in COBOL. And it all runs as one application. So if you, as our head of the organization said to me, George, replace this COBOL system, I might say, oh my gosh, I have to replace the whole thing at once, and I don't know how to do that, and I don't know how the people. So Paul, what I'll do is I'll just put a little web presence on top of the COBOL app, and you're like, great, now we have a web presence. And then you would come to me a year later and say, well, now we need a device that runs natively on iOS and Android. Well, here is my little front-end device. So you, as a customer-facing part of our company, is like, great, I'm now providing our customers with what they need. But in the background, I'm saying, oh my gosh, I'm still running on a 60-year-old piece of technology that might be running on hardware that's in a basement of an old data center somewhere, or even if it's in a cloud, it's still very old technology. And I think that's where we see people today.
So you've explained a little bit about how these older systems have been put together in the past, but why are people still using them? Why are they still in play today? Why haven't they been replaced?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is that it comes back to risk, right? And we talk to people in the banking industry or in healthcare or whatever. Everyone's always trying to understand how to manage the risk. And I think we've seen a lot of people think, well, the system works. I don't want to break it. It's really big. I don't know how to patch it. And so since it's not broken, there's low risk. And so I think people have been lulled a little bit into a sense of the risk is low. And I think what the COVID crisis taught us, and I saw an example again yesterday in the news, the Small Business Administration, here we are speaking in late April, we got ready to distribute a whole bunch of money to people who really need it. And there are all these regional banks who had teed up all this stuff because the money needed to flow through regional banks if you're a consumer. And the SBA application crashed. And so I don't know if that was written in COBOL or not, but it's, again, their primary mandate here in an hour of crisis is to be able to scale to support millions of people. And they can't do it. So what looked like no risk, now it's all over. It's in the Wall Street Journal, it's in the New York Times. I'm sure it's gotten all the way up to the national level authorities, to the current administration saying, hey, we got this money. We all agreed we need to give this money to people to keep the economy going. And now that system can't deliver that. So it turned out to be a huge risk and basically broke their ability to run their business. So I think that's been part of the problem, is that they didn't anticipate this kind of change from steady state to all of a sudden, as you mentioned to me last week, 6 million people in New Jersey now are filing for unemployment. The unemployment rate in the United States went from under 3% to over 13% in under a month. No one expected this to happen. So all these systems are basically breaking because they don't scale.
So George, you talk a lot about risk, and many of these organizations are out there right now trying to alleviate that risk by hiring people to do this COBOL programming. One of the senior vice presidents that was in the news this morning was quoted as saying, I'm not worried about the people that are retired. I'm worried about the people that are expired. So literally the people that built these systems are no longer on the planet today, and there's no one left to do this work.
Yeah, Paul, and that is a very, very powerful, observation. I think one of the things that this COVID crisis has already shown us is that good crisis managers do a lot of their work before the crisis hits, right? And when we've seen some places that have done well with it, some places that haven't done so well. I think what our experience tells us, if you realize that your inability to scale your financial services application or maybe insurance or whatever vertical you're in, you say, you can't wait for the federal government to say, hey, I'd like to distribute $3 trillion in money. Can you help us? Say, oh, now my system won't scale. Now I'm going to retire my COBOL system. When the federal government is saying, hey, we're getting this money out next week, please distribute it in 2 days. You have to have thought about that months or years ahead of time and realize your infrastructure cannot scale to do that. And that's going to be a crisis. And you're going to be the bottleneck of doing something you really want to do, which is keep society moving, whether it's economic relief or healthcare relief or whatever. So good crisis managers do a lot of their work before the crisis hits. And I think what we found is when you're doing this application retirement and rationalization, you decide to do it, then it takes a while to run through all the steps, and then you're in the pipe and you're incrementally. If you decide after looking at this video, hey, I'm going to build my crisis management playbook, you can't build the playbook and then wait for the crisis and now open and say, now I'm going to execute. Because if you're in healthcare, you may say, now I need all my PPE. Well, you didn't stockpile your PPE, so now you're in trouble because everyone in the world wants PPE. And similarly in this, it's a little more technical and a little bit more abstract, but it's the same problem. You have to start to evaluate how you're going to migrate these systems. You can't do it in the crisis, right? So I think that's the big observation that we're coaching people on.
So it sounds like crisis management really begins with some proactive thought and some proactive action ahead of the game so that when the crisis comes, you're not doing crisis management, you're just doing management. So you and I spoke about a 3-step plan that companies can take to manage that process. And the first step in that process was application analysis. Could you talk to us a little bit about how someone would look at their portfolio of applications and make that determination on how to advance that app?
Right, and I think that what we see with these legacy systems is a lot of times, as I said, they're very monolithic. They were built 60 years ago, and they might have been patched with little pieces of functionality. So when you go back and look at it, you may say, gosh, we're not even in this business anymore. We decided we're not going to do banking in this state, or we're not going to process those types of loans, or we're not doing, this. We're not even selling those annuities anymore. And so what we find a lot of people is like, we can just take this behavior out of our legacy system. You might find that new systems completely redundant with what you've got. And so you can turn off the old system, migrate the data to the new one. You might say, hey, a lot of these systems were designed to do update. I don't need to do update anymore on data that's 40 years old. I might have to hold on to it for legal reasons, retention policies, but I don't have to update it. And so again, I think you're right that the first step is application analysis. It looks at alignment with where your current business is. It looks at classification. What does this app actually do? We've had customers who don't even know what their application boundaries are because it's just this giant, pool of behaviors that they're running. And finally, how do you move that new thing forward? And that's the first step. And you can start that today. You don't have to make a big investment in software. You don't have to make a lot of decisions about, how you're going to archive your data today. But get started on that application analysis, and you'll probably find interesting things about your organization, ways to optimize, ways to free up dollars for innovation. But you have to kind of open, that scary black box you haven't looked at in 30 years or just been writing little web portals around and really look into it to see what you can turn off and what you need to move forward with.
Great, thanks. I would imagine with most 30 or 50-year-old applications, probably the recommendation of the path forward is going to be to replace it with something more modern. But one of the things that you and I have found in some of these application rationalization projects is if it's built on technology that is still viable, that is still supported, and it's still functional, then sometimes you don't have to sunset that application. You might just be able to do a patch or an upgrade on that and keep that going forward. Others, as I said, are probably too old to keep, and you want to move that into a more modern infrastructure and perhaps take some of that data and move that into an offline archive to perhaps save cost or to optimize some disk. The second step in the process talks about data rationalization. I know there's a couple things that we do in data rationalization, right? You want to talk about converting the data from these copybooks. You want to look at data harmonization, and also perhaps optimizing that data as you move it into a new system or move it into an offline system. Could you talk a little bit about that, George?
Yeah, that's certainly a key next step. And it's kind of interesting if you look in healthcare or insurance or energy or financial services, everyone's wanting to do machine learning. Everyone's wanting to do predictive analytics. They want to do historical analysis. But to do that, you have to understand what the data is. And back in the day, when all these COBOL systems were being built, memory was very expensive. And so they built this crazy notion that two different parts of the program could look at the same number of bytes and interpret the data differently. Like today, as a technologist, my hair kind of curls up saying, well, gosh, how can I share that data? I can't put it in a data warehouse. I can't do analytics on it because I don't know what it is. Different parts of the program are going to look at it differently. So this data harmonization is very valuable, because once I do that, then I can start taking this older data and I can move it into my existing data warehousing. I can do machine learning on it. I can start doing predictive analytics. But until I understand what the data is, I can't do any of that. And that's what we see some vendors talk about. Oh, we'll do a lift and shift. We'll come in, we'll take your existing application, we'll wrap it in some virtualization, we'll put it in our cloud, and oh, by the way, we run the cloud, so we'll do the assessment for free for you. Aren't we nice? And it turns out, because they're going to get a annuity stream from you on the back end. So I'm a little jaded about that approach. I think our approach is much better for our customers to say, let's do an assessment, turn off what we can, migrate what we want to. As you say, some of those things we don't need anymore. Some we're just going to put in our archive. We can put it in lower cost storage. But we get it also, we understand what it is. Because a lot of times that's valuable IP that you can't use because it's locked in these COBOL copybooks, which are part of the program. They're not sitting in a data dictionary. You can't evaluate them by any other program until you find that copybook. So I think getting all that stuff harmonized and assessed is a key next step. And again, you don't have to buy any hardware to do that. You don't have to buy any cloud provisioning. Yeah, you might bring in some consulting expertise to help you with that journey. But again, it's a relatively low cost thing you can do right now.
Great. Thanks for that. So companies have gone through that application analysis. They understand what the application does today, what it needs to do in the future. They've looked at the data. They understand how that data is structured, how it can be ported, how it can be harmonized and moved into the new application. Now, really, the third step is the implementation plan. It's time to take action, and any action is better than no action. There's a great quote we put up here right now, which says, "Perfect is the enemy of good." This new plan doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be an iterative plan. You can perfect that as you move forward. You can make some mistakes. You can correct those. You can move forward. But just taking some action is really what you need to do. What we've seen is people then would gather their business users, gather their IT users, get together with the subject matter experts, get a small group of people that you can use as your team and take some action and get this plan started going forward, so that you're not in the crisis mode when the crisis hits. You're just managing. You're not doing crisis management. So any final thoughts, George, for the audience today?
Yeah, I think this has been great. So thanks for taking the time to chat. It's always fun to talk to you about these topics. I think I would just reiterate what you just said, is that you really, if one thing this has taught us in the last month is we're all interconnected, and in a lot of ways that we didn't quite understand. Whether we're suddenly needing a surge of investment from the government, or whether we're doing unemployment checks, and these systems are not scaled to handle those big changes. So our financial systems have run well when everything is pretty predictable. And what I think this COVID crisis has shown us is the world is still really unpredictable. Maybe we got a little complacent, think, oh, we've got all this technology. And so you need a crisis management plan, and you need to start now. And not starting is actually risky. It's like, don't go to the dentist when you've got this giant, pain in your jaw, right? Go to the dentist every once in a while, look at what's going on in your mouth and take action. Same thing with your systems. You got to be looking at your systems. Sometimes it's kind of scut work, right? But people who've done that got through this last month in good shape. Organizations that didn't do that, they face serious brand impact. They haven't been able to satisfy their mission statement. And it's been really a very strong, almost like a disaster, I would say, for some of these businesses that have lost huge face with their customers. And I think a lot of customers are going to move away from these institutions because they couldn't take care of them in their time of need, right? So I think this is super powerful. And thanks so much for letting me chat with you today.
Great summary, George. And to our audience, we appreciate you listening to us today. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, we welcome your feedback. We'd like to hear from you. You can check out our website. And thank you very much for your time and attention today. Goodbye.